How do you design a roast profile for a coffee that you have never roasted before? Well, this video might give you an insight into how I go about building that out, the methodologies, the understanding and the concepts. If you're new here, my name's James. I am a roaster at Blending Room, which is a company that I own. It's a roastery based in Hull, East Yorkshire in the United Kingdom, and I currently roast on a Loring S15 Falcon. I've been roasting for 16 years now, and preceding the Falcon, I used to roast on a Probat Series 2 and preceding that, a Diedrich IR3. In my career, I've roasted something around 50,000 batches, and during that time, I've had plenty of time to be able to analyze how I actually build out roast profiles. For this video, I'm going to use a natural process mixed cultivar coffee from Brazil, produced by Daniel Caldeira and brought into the UK by Falcon Speciality. I've never touched this coffee before. I've not previously roasted it, and I've got next to no idea about how the green will perform inside of the Loring. But of course, I've got to be able to roast this as well as I possibly can so that I can release it to our customers and they get a delightful experience at home whilst they're having a brew. So here's how I go about the profile. First, you've got to understand a little bit about the cultivars. I've described it as a mixed cultivar, but we do have some information provided to us by the importers. And this is a yellow Catuai, an Arara and a Mundo Novo mix. So I've got some concept of each of those individual cultivars because I've roasted those previously. I've roasted them from various different countries and specifically from Brazil. I also have roasted plenty of natural process coffees before, and it's important to understand the processing and the green when you come to build out the profile that you want, because both of those things have a fundamentally important part based on the cup profile. And what I mean there is how the coffee is going to taste inside of the cup. You must have that end design before you put this anywhere near a roaster. So let's just talk about that a little bit. I enjoy well-balanced coffee. Well-balanced coffee to me is where I can perceive some acidity, there's sweetness, there's texture, there is a finish, and I should be able to taste the cultivar, the process of cultivating the coffee, more so than I can the roasting process or the cooking process. So I have certain metrics on a cupping table or inside a final brew that I would qualify a well-balanced coffee. And that is my end goal when I'm designing a roast profile. Moving one step back from that, of course, because I'm a professional roaster, I want to avoid any roasting defects. So that's tipping, scorching, underdevelopment, overdevelopment, and other things of that ilk. I will choose not to proceed with certain things that I am aware that the roaster will assist me in those metrics, underdevelopment, overdevelopment, etc. Understanding what not to do is a very important thing of anything in life, and especially roasting coffee. Coming back a little bit further, I then look at the processing method. So understanding that it's a natural process coffee is important for this particular instance. Understanding the processing will denote how much energy you are putting into the roasting chamber at certain points within the life cycle of the roast itself. Preceding that, understanding the cultivar will allow you to understand how much energy you'd put into other aspects of the overall roast profile. And then you have some nuanced things like, what's the atmosphere during that day? So what's the internal temperature, internal humidity? How's the wind speed outdoors? How do you feel? Are you in an aggressive aggro mood and you really don't want to roast today? Or are you in a light and great mood that means that you're going to do good work? Because those things are intrinsic to good work itself and of course good roasted coffee. Now, this is all right, me just talking about these things. So let's show you a roast profile of this coffee and I'll walk you through those stages and how that interpreted into a live executed roast. On the screen now, you will see the roast profile that I have used for this particular coffee. You'll note that there are different colored lines, a green line, a yellow line, and two blue lines. I specifically focus on the two blue lines because that's what gives me a lot of understanding as to how the roast is progressing. It's an interpretation of the energy or total energy absorbed by the coffee beans over a period of time. Specifically, this blue line here, this ever increasing blue line, well, that's a representation of the bean curve. That is how temperature is being perceived by a probe inside of the roast chamber over a given period of time. The line that you can see that is pointing downwards is our rate of rise curve. Now, this is a mathematical representation of how quickly the energy is going up or down throughout the roast cycle. It's a very important part of understanding the velocity of your roasted batch. We use the rate of rise curve to measure how quickly we are going to get to our end design. Lots of people have different ways of interpreting the rate of rise curve and its importance and relevance, but it is something that I focus an awful lot on. Below those lines, there's a gas input graph, and this shows how I've applied gas into the roast chamber throughout the given period of time, and that input of gas is then seen inside of the rate of rise curve and the bean temperature curve over time. So let's drill into how I designed this. I use a standard batch size. In this case, it's a 12 kilo batch on a 15 kilo Loring S15 Falcon. I stick at that static batch size for every batch that I do so that I can control one of the metrics. What temperature do I drop the coffee into the roasting drum? That temperature will then give me a momentum throughout the roast. It's important to understand what that preferential start temperature is, and I suggest fixing your batch size and fixing that start temperature throughout your roasting career, only making adjustments when you have large temperature swings, etc. Through experience, I've understood that the early parts of the roast are intrinsically linked to the cultivars that you are roasting. So I look at any and all temperatures under 160 degrees Celsius or our drying phase before we go into the next phase, Maillard, as linked to cultivar. So each cultivar may require a different amount of energy input because it will yield a better or a worse flavor profile if there's too little or too much energy in that section of the roast. If I don't know the coffee, I use certain values that, broadly speaking, fit a broad number of cultivars. So in this instance, with the coffee being a mixed cultivar, I chose to fall back on one of my other metrics, which is for all filter coffees, I look to achieve somewhere around 16 degrees per minute of increase in temperature when I hit 160 degrees Celsius. It's just something that I've formulated over a long period of time. Once I've built a method of getting to that 160 degrees Celsius, I then figure out how I'm going to get to first crack and beyond. I am building pressure inside of the coffee bean up to this point, and I want to make sure that that pressure is proportionate by the time I reach first crack. Too much and too much velocity means that I'm very likely to overshoot and overcook or over roast the coffee. Too little pressure means that I'm very likely to underdevelop the coffee. Pressure is intrinsic to the development of flavor. Now, we don't want too much overdevelopment or too little underdevelopment. So measuring your temperature input is very important. Again, these are linked to cultivars, so understanding the cultivar of the coffee that you're roasting is very important whilst you're building up a library of knowledge based on cultivar and roasting techniques. The next important event to understand is first crack. This is when lots of water vapor, or some water vapor, is released into the roasting environment, and from there you begin to get a roasted coffee. There are different lengths of time that you can spend within or post first crack, and that will have an intrinsic link to the overall cup profile. These are also linked generally to processing methods. So you might have different methods or different periods of time that you are extending the roast post first crack proportionate to the method of processing. A washed coffee may require a little more time post first crack than, say, a natural process coffee. These are things that you'll have to figure out over a period of time, but understand that this proportion of the roast profile is linked to that processing method. I won't go into the nuances of impact of development time on cup profile, rather state, just understand that processing and development time are linked. In this case, I chose 1 minute and 21 in post first crack development time because I wanted to retain some acidity but allow some texture as well. Of course, I've got to choose an end temperature because end temperature is chemistry locked in. The lower the end temperature, you tend to have more fruit composition, a brighter acidity, and a lighter body. The higher the temperature, you get more roast characters, more texture, and therefore you need to have some idea as to the end temperature you want to achieve based on the thing that you like in the cup, your interpretation of your most delicious coffee. The other metric that I really like to think about as well is the percentage weight loss. Understanding of the percentage weight loss will give you an idea as to what style of roast that you have achieved, a light roast, medium roast, dark roast, etc. This is how much water and organic matter has been roasted away and roasted out of the bean. The smaller that number, the more character potential you have retained, and the larger that number, the more character potential you have lost. Inside of that range, it's entirely up to you what you do. This is your coffee, your roast, and your design. Do what you want, but understand that weight loss percentage is an important metric in your roast profile design. I tend to have a percentage weight loss for a light roast between 11.5% and 12.5%. And if I'm roasting a medium roast, I'm somewhere like 14%-ish, something like that. That's where I find my most delicious balance. Right, I think I've rambled a little bit and maybe this presentation hasn't been wholly cohesive. So I'll just recap. When designing a roast profile for a new coffee that you have never seen before, consider your charge temperature based on your batch size. Consider your drying phase based on the cultivar of coffee that you are roasting. Consider your Maillard to first crack, similarly based on the cultivar, and remember about pressure buildup inside of those beans. Your post first crack development time is intrinsically linked to processing method, so understand that before you begin roasting. Think too about your percentage weight loss, because that gives you an indication of how much of the character that you have retained or released based on your cup profile design. And that segues neatly into have a design. Have an understanding about what you specifically enjoy about coffee. Do you like light and vibrant coffees? In which case, choose a profile design that suits that. If you like well-developed, heavy, viscous coffees, choose a profile design that suits that. Roasted coffee is an extension of the roaster's desire for that coffee, so know what that desire is. I hope that this presentation has been somewhat useful. I recognize that I've likely rambled and, again, not been entirely cohesive. If you have any comment on what I've described, do let me know in the comment section below. It would be great to understand how you approach development of a roast profile for an unknown coffee. And on that statement, I'll close. You have a great week ahead. Cheers.